How's it, guys? This is Dayvy FPL and welcome back to the Fantasy Premier League video here on my channel. Now in this video we're going to be talking about a game week for Wildcard Draft. Personally, I'm not wildcarding, but for those of you who are wildcarding, quite a requested video, usually on a weekly basis over on my Twitter. People want a wildcard draft, so that's exactly what this video is going to be about. We're going to be talking about how to set up your wildcard draft to get the most profit out of the upcoming game weeks, as well as finally looking at what players I would select if I was going to wildcard in game week 4. So that's something you're interested in. Sit back, relax, and let's get into it. So a new season calls for a new sponsor, but here on the Dayvy FPL channel, we like our old. So I've brought back the old sponsor, OneFootball, but with a completely new revamped app. Yes, OneFootball has gone over a complete marketing revamp, new logo, new everything. I've checked it out, looks really good. They kind of took the old app, but just made it better. So I'm really appreciative of that. If you want to go check them out, link down in the description below to go download the app. If you don't know who they are, they're the biggest app on iOS and Android, so go check them out. I personally use them, so I can recommend them from a personal level. So if I was on a wild card this week, these are things that I would be taking into account. Personally, I think it's a really hard game week to kind of use my wild card on. We saw in the game week 3 wild carders how actually bad it was, and this fixture didn't really pan out how we expected to, and I think that cost a lot of people some points. But with the wild card, it's not a 1 week chip. You can kind of have it for as long as you want. Maybe if you're only going to use your second wild card in game week 38, you can kind of get the maximum game weeks out of your wild card. But if I was on a wild card, I would be looking at penalty takers. We've seen how those penalties are kind of resurged into the Premier League this season, especially with that new handball rule that seems to be implemented quite strictly. So I would be looking at penalty takers. Now, you don't have to necessarily have a full starting 15 of penalty takers for your wild card. What I'm saying is, if you have two players that you are considering, maybe they're both at a similar price and they're both performing on a similar basis in terms of performance and stats, then I would be looking at which one of those two are on penalties. So this could be a valuable asset in the future, as I'm pretty sure that they can't change this penalty rule as of now, as that would be unfair on the teams that have already conceded these kind of shoddy penalties. But I think in terms of my team, if I was on a wild card, I'd be looking at penalty takers for my team for the upcoming game weeks. And then secondly, I would use the fixtures. This kind of ties into the hard to predict season, a kind of talking point, because right now you can't really predict who's going to be performing well and who won't. We saw that in game week 3, Man City and Wolves got absolutely nailed, and that kind of hurt those wild carders. I would just use the fixture plan. If the team has easy fixtures within the next 5 or 10 game weeks, then I'd be looking at that team. And if you are looking at your premiums, maybe I wouldn't look too much into the fixtures, as we've seen the tougher fixtures sometimes are actually easier and your player can get some good returns out of it. As I said, really hard game week to wildcard, so I'm going to do my best to kind of give you a team that I think is pretty safe to get you some FPL points in the upcoming game weeks. So this is the wildcard draft I've been looking at. We've gone for triple Aston Villa defense. We've gone for triple West Ham, Alexander-Arnold, Robertson, Mount, Fernandes, Bamford, Vardy, and Ings. I'm only joking. This is kind of something that I just strapped together to kind of iterate the points that I've said, that it's a little bit hard to predict, because if someone came to me with this draft going into game week 3, I probably would have raised some suspicions on a couple of players and suggested some alternative options. But if you actually look at this lineup, it's not too bad, to be honest. You're lacking the likes of a Man City or maybe a Salah, but in terms of the forward department and the defense, it's actually looking quite good. But I wanted to raise this point, as I said, to iterate that you can't really predict these fixtures, so just pick a team that you think will do well, and then you can kind of move on from that. But this is not the wild card that I would use. I would be going on to this draft in a little bit, because there are a couple of teams here that I am expecting to regress in terms of FPL points, and other teams that I'm expecting to expand and take advantage of these good fixtures that they do have. So this is the proper wildcard draft that I've kind of brought up. I will personally not be wildcarding this week. I wanted to raise that because a lot of people are asking me in my Twitter comments and on YouTube if I'm wildcarding. I'm not going to be wildcarding this week. I said that I personally think it's quite a hard game week to wildcard, because we have so much unpredictability in the Prem at the moment, and we're going to see how these penalties kind of play out in the opening 5 game weeks. If we see that the penalties aren't kind of going away, and yet again we're getting a lot more penalties, I think that you could almost have a strategy of using a wild card to bring in a full 15 of penalty takers. I think that'll be absolutely mental. Might be a little bit boring, because I think it takes the strategy away from FPL, but it might be the best way to gain an advantage over those other FPL managers that don't have those penalty takers in their squads. So starting off in goal, we've gone for Steer and Martinez. Now I know that Aston Villa's fixtures get a lot harder. They have had 2 really nice fixtures off the bat against easier opposition that I think they should be keeping clean sheets against, and if they can kind of take this defensive form into the upcoming game weeks, I do think they'll be getting a clean sheet sheet here and there. That's definitely better than some of the other 4.5 options. I'm thinking of McCarthy and Ryan. Those players haven't been really returning the clean sheet points, so you might as well just go for Martinez. He is going to price rise, so by the time this video is released, he could have already had a price rise, so that's a little bit unfortunate there. Talking about the price rises, this team does have 0.5 in the bank. I kind of did this with the emphasis of bringing in Mo Salah and Sadio Mane after their fixtures get a little bit easier. I probably would hold off from Salah and Mane for the next 3 fixtures and then bring them in after that, as I do think from that point of view they're going to be essential because Liverpool are just playing so well at the moment and they're almost one of the best fixture-proof teams at the current moment in the Premier League. The rest of the defense is a little bit self-explanatory. We've gone for some nice cheap 4.5s. I just think there's so much value at the moment with these 4.5 options. There haven't been many clean sheets in the opening couple game weeks. Aston Villa, I've been on the receiving end of 2 of those, so that's why I've considered Martinez a good option. But I just think at 4.5, you've got Taylor, you've got Walker-Peters, you've got Lamptey. I know Lamptey's at 4.6, but then you've also got Mitchell at 4.1. Now with Mitchell, the interesting thing I found is the quotes that have followed him are from Roy Hodgson, basically praising him and saying how good he is. And his stats are almost a replica of Wan-Bissaka in his first season. So I think once PVA comes back from his injury, I think it's going to be quite hard to drop Mitchell at the moment. There's talks about PVA maybe playing in a more advanced winger position, and that's only going to lend to Mitchell getting some more minutes and hopefully some more defensive points. But with the 4.5s, you can go for any 4.5s you like. I've opted for Taylor here, as Burnley are usually quite defensive, and then with Lamptey and Walker-Peters, they just have such an attacking threat going forward that I think they're a little bit hard to miss, as even if their team doesn't keep a clean sheet, you still have that threat of an assist or maybe even a goal. With Trent Alexander-Arnold, you could also go for Robertson if you need the money. Robertson and Trent, actually Robertson's performing better than Trent at the current moment, but I think Trent over the upcoming game weeks will kind of even that threat out, and with him being on free kicks, just another dimension to his crosses that he's getting. And also Liverpool, I think over the upcoming game weeks will get a couple more clean sheets. Defensively, they're looking a little bit strong. I know against Arsenal that pretty bad defensive mistake, but I think that's only a once in a couple game weeks mistake that they're going to be making, so I'm expecting some defensive returns from Trent Alexander-Arnold. The midfield, a little bit more exciting here. We've got Klich and Podence as our 5.5s. Now Klich is on penalties and probably the reason why he's in this lineup. I've opted for him over Bamford, as I think although Bamford is so cheap and performing so well, I think some regression is going to happen there with these returns, and with these other forward assets that are just offering so much value going forward, I definitely think that I'm more favored to some other options. So Klich comes in here, and then with Podence, he is currently injured, so it might be a little bit of a risk if maybe Nuno comes out in the press conference later on the week and said Podence is back. I do think he'll start as long as he is fit, so I think Podence is going to be a good option to kind of combinate with Raul Jimenez because of those lovely fixtures. We've got Harvey Barnes, we spoke about in the preview. Son replacements, go check that out, link in the description below. But Harvey Barnes, I really like him, and with those upcoming home fixtures that Leicester have, I think he's going to be getting some good returns. Then with Sterling and De Bruyne, I think at the current moment, I would rather go for Sterling and De Bruyne than the Liverpool assets because of those upcoming fixtures. Liverpool have some tough fixtures coming up in the next 3, whereas Man City have some lovely fixtures coming up in the next 3, and I think they're going to be looking to bounce back from that shock defeat to Leicester. I know it might not be a shock, but it was to me, as I did predict a Man City win. But with Sterling and De Bruyne, with those injuries at the current moment, with that Man City lineup, I just think they're almost guaranteed to start. So they'll be my 2 combinations. I spoke about that 0.5 in the bank to upgrade either of these options to Salah or Mane, whoever you choose there after the upcoming 3 game weeks. Going to the forward line is really where it's at the current moment. There are a lot of good options, and there's also a lot of potential that could be happening there. I'm thinking of Werner and Martial. At the current moment, they're not performing that well, but if you think that Werner and Martial, just the potential that they have for FPL returns, I think it's going to spice things up if those teams can get their act together. I've opted for Ings, Jimenez and Calvert-Lewin at the current moment. If you can afford Richarlison, I probably would look at him over Calvert-Lewin just because he is on penalties at the current moment, and we've spoken about penalties continuously, that's just the bigger threat for a player. And with Calvert-Lewin, I know that he's scoring a lot at the moment, but I think regression is also going to be happening with him, and Richarlison is going to catch him up on those FPL points. Jimenez and Ings we've spoken about in depth in that preview, so go check that out. But I just think with those upcoming 2 fixtures against West Brom and Fulham, they're definitely going to be scoring in game week 4, so I would be looking at these 2 players, maybe even to hold for the rest of the season, just because they're so consistent and they are cheaper than the other premium forwards who aren't really performing at the moment. So this is basically a wrap up the video, guys. Hopefully you did enjoy it. Please don't forget to like it if you did, and subscribe if you're new or have not subscribed yet. I'll be checking you guys for the team selection coming up tomorrow. Otherwise, on my Twitter at DayvyFPL. I'm going to be signing off. This has been Dayvy FPL, and I'm out. Cheers. Bye.